Now, so let's go back to the instances. These instances are gone. So we are going to create two different instances, as you can see. So we are going to call the first one web server, which is going to be the instances that are going to run our WordPress application. So we are picking the Red Hat OS. Right. For the web server, we are going to do a bit of a kind of a deviation from our usual setup. We're going to use the T2 small, and the reason why we are using this is based on the fact, or based on my personal experience. I discovered that using the T2 micro to set up the web server kind of run into issues, especially when we are kind of installing additional repo, a package repo like the Remis repos and the EPL repo. So when I kind of changed it to the T2 small, I discovered that I wasn't having that issue of me getting stuck while trying to install. So I'm going to select my key pair for authentication. And for this particular web server, I'm going to use my default security group. But I'm going to do a bit of a tweak here. I'm going to edit. I'm going to click on the edit button here in the security, in the network setting. And I'm going to select a subnet, right? Because it's very important that you pay attention to your availability zone. And the reason being that if you allow AWS to decide, they can decide whatever availability zone from the three. And I want to be sure that I have a bit of a control over my availability zone, because I'm going to actually use that information to set up my EBS when I'm trying to set up my EBS. So I think that's just the additional settings we are doing here. And based on that, yeah. I think we can launch this now. So while waiting, so we can go back to this. Can launch another one. So basically, right, so we have created this, so we are trying to create the other instance. Okay, network is a bit DB server. You can see, right, still the same thing. So I'll maintain my T2 micro for the DB because we won't really be running so much application on that. So let's pick my E. So I'll change this to subnet 3A. Right. Then I've created a security group especially for the MySQL or the DB server, right? Because it has a bit of a separate setting apart from the default. So, but I'm going to explain that when we get to that point. Now, so based on that, I think we have set up the required. Okay, so yeah, so we have the two instances running now. So we go back to the Elastic Block Store, and we are going to create 6 Elastic Block Store, 3 each for the 2 instance runs. So this I'm going to call this. Okay, so I'm going to call this web server root, indicating that this is the EB that the EBS block that was created when the instance was launched. So I'll call this DB server root. So this will allow me to be able to know exactly which of the EBs I'm dealing with. So let's create additional EBs. Now we're going to create 10. It has to be 10. Now, based on the availability zone I picked earlier on, I have to ensure that it is the same availability zone I'm actually creating the EB on. So I'm going to call this web server. Let me just copy this, but I'll need this. So I'll call this volume 1, then create. Okay, so just rename this so that's volume 1. So we're going to create more. Ensure this is 10. So just this volume 2 with get another one. Sure this is 10. Still the same availability zone. So we do volume 3. Then right. So oh boy. Alright, I think this is let me see. Let's see. Okay, what is my tag? Tag is what's volume 3. So, okay, so I can go back and rename this to volume 3. Then I'll rename this to volume 2. So it's still the same processes. So let me just pause a bit so that I can quickly create all the volumes. Alright, so all the volumes have been created, as you can see. All the volumes has been created. Well, it's not really a strict requirement for you to name your volumes or tag them, but I just feel it's a good practice for you to give each of your volume appropriate name for easy reference and the likes. So we'll start attaching. So let's start with the DB. Let's attach them to the instances. So the reason why we have to ensure that the volume is set up in the same availability zone as the instance. If they are not on the same availability zone, you won't be able to see the instance here for you to select. So because they are in the same availability zone, which is the 3A, I'm able to see this. So I'm going to give it a name, attach. So I'm going to do the same thing for the remaining 5 volumes. Alright, so if you can see my screen, you'll be able to see that now I've attached the 3 volumes. Right, I've attached the 3 volumes, 3 of those volumes, apart from the initial root volume that was attached to the instance during creation. I've attached the additional 3 volumes to the database server and 3 volumes to the web server as well. Now, so we'll go back to our documentation. As you can see, so we have done this. So what we are trying to aim for is something similar to this. We are going to use the 3EB to create an aggregate volume group, which we are now going to use to create 2 separate logical volumes using the LVM manager which we are going to do the same thing for the web server. And the reason being that is that one of the LV, which is the logical volume, will contain the application source code. Then the other one will be mounted to the application log folder, which is the variable log, and which are basically the two folder that will be actively involved as the application runs over time. We'll do the same thing for also for the database, as you can see from my diagram. So once we are done with that, right, which as you can see, once we are able to set up these two instances and attach the 3 EBS to each of the database, we should have something like that, which is similar to what we have in our AWS console. Now we need to configure our EBS and logical using the logical volume manager in our web server and our database. So we start from the web server. So we are going to go back to our instances for us to be able to connect to the web server. So connect to the web server. I'm going to copy the SSH code. So I'm going to launch my terminal. Terminal. Right, so I'm launching my terminal window. Right, so I'm going to enter into the folder that contains my secret key, or what we call the key pair file. Then I'm going to paste this code. If everything goes well, we should be able to connect to this. Right, yes, everything is going well. So type yes. Good, so we are currently inside. So let me kind of expand it a bit for easy seeing. Now, if you go back to our documentation, right? Now, the first command that we need to paste here is what we call the list block. ls list, then blk block. So list block is going to show us all the the devices or the volume block that is attached to our instance. So if I paste the command, which I've copied, all right. Now you can see the 3 blocks, the 3 additional blocks. The first one we have here is the initial EB block that was attached to the instance for it to install the OS and the like. So the 3 additional one that we attached are this, which is the XVDB, XVDC, and XVDD. Now the next step in this, after we have seen this, is for us to configure the configure the logical volume manager. And for us to do that, we need to install the logical volume manager, then install a nano for text editor, and we'll probably install the widgets for now, though we'll probably be needing this until we get to the WordPress installation. So first of all, we are going to update our package manager. This is going to take a bit of time, so we are going to pause our video while it installs. Alright, I think we are back. Installation is complete. So move to the next step, which is to install the logical volume manager, nano, and widgets. Just copy and paste the command. Yes. So while that is done, let's go back. Now to check for the availability of partition, use the logical volume manager this kind of command, which is this. to check if we have any partitioning. But however, we don't need this command for now, right? We can just use we have used our list disk, list block um, to check our devices to know the blocks are attached. So while we did that, we'll take note of the device number. Let me just do that again. So you can see, right? So block. So what we need to take note of is these names, as we need them for the next step. So the next step is for us to create a partition, a single partition on each of the volume blocks. So we'll do that by using the gdisk command. Then we'll reference the volume we tried to create a partition on, db. So n, to create a new partition, accept all the defaults. You can use P to see the partition table, then W to save the change disk. Right, so we can do this for the rest of this. All right, and accept. Oh, sorry about that. Right. Yes. All right, the last one. Right. And accept. And also P W. Yes. So let me clear the screen. Now, if I do ls block, now you can see that we have created 3 partitions. So if you use the sudo vm disk scan, I think we should be able to see the partition now. Yes, as you can see, here as indicated, we have 6 partitions. 6 partitions, right? But these other partitions are for the OS, the initial OS instances. So, but these are the other 3 partitions we created. Now, we needed to create a physical volume for each of the partitions. So we need to take note of the partition names. So this is what we are dealing with now. So the next step, let's go back to our documentation. So we are done with this step. Alright, so we need to create the physical volume. So see, copy the command. Then I'm going to use the 3 newly created physical volume and aggregate them to create a volume group. Copy the command, paste. Right, that has been done. Then using this, I'm going to split this volume into 2 logical volume, right? And to do that, I'm going to copy this, one for the application and one for the log, as I explained earlier on. Copy this. This should create for the application, like this, and this should create for the log. So it's more like what we are trying to do is more like we are creating a virtual volume, right? A virtual volume using, so we have three separate volumes, right? We use those three separate volumes to generate a two separate virtual volumes which we can dynamically resize based on the need of our application without any downtime. So that's why we are going through this entire process. Now, so for us to be able to, so we have created this, so we can check what we have created using the ls log command. Let me clear the screen. So ls. Now, as you can see we have this. So the volume is distributed across the two volumes. The two logical volumes are distributed across the three volume block. If I had additional volume block, maybe based on the need of my application, right? I can add the same volume block into the volume group. Then I can use that additional space and I can use that to resize either the application logical volume or the log logical volume depending on the application need. So, and I can do all this without shutting down my instances or taking off the application offline. The application can be online and I can add volume space to the application without the need of us taking it offline. Now, so let's move to the next step. So the next step is for us to create, so you can use this command to check your entire setup if you want to, just to give you an idea of everything that is set up. So here you can see we have a volume group, and this is the size of the volume group, right? Then we use the volume group to create two logical volumes, as you can see, two logical volumes which are 14 gig each. Then we have three physical volume, which is the initial physical volume we created from the underlying EBS block. So let's just clear this. So we need to create a file system for each of our logical volume. And for us to do that, I'm going to take this command. This will create the necessary file systems. Then I'm going to take the second command. So I've created the documentation in such a way that if you follow the documentation step by step, you should be able to replicate exactly what I am doing on the system. And so once we create this, we need to mount this logical volume to a location. So more like mapping it to a location. But before we do that, we will need to create the location we're trying to map them to. Now we are going to create a location where we are going to put our application file. Then we want to map it to the log location. But before we do that, the log location have an existing file, and once we mount to that location, what happens is that during the mounting process is going to empty the entire the folder, clear out the existing file. So to avoid us losing any vital information or vital file in the process, what we'll do is to create a temporary log folder where we can quickly back up our log file in there before we mount. So we're going to create this temporary folder, also creating the application source code folder where we are going to put our WordPress application. So just copy the command, paste it. That has been done. Then we'll back up our log folder. Right. Oh, sorry, I did not copy that. This. So this is what I'm supposed to copy. I want to back up the log folder. Right. So the essence of the AV flag, the A is for is telling the rsync command to archive, right? Then also to preserve the attributes of each files and folder within the log directories. So that has been done. Then we can mount each location by using the mount command. Just mount. That has been done. Then I can mount this also. Then I will restore the log folder contents by taking it from the recovery folder back to the log folder. Right, that completes that. To ensure that once our instance is being rebooted, it will remember the mount, you will remember the connection between the EBS and the mount location. So, for us to do that, we need to save that instruction inside the file system tab. And before that, we need to get the UUID, that is universal unique ID of our LV volume. So to do that, I'm going to write this. Right, good. If you look at it very well, you can see this is for the application LV. This is the UUID value. Then if you check here, you find that of the log. So these are the two information we are actually looking for, right? So I can just copy them. I can copy them and keep them somewhere, basically, anyway. Right. I can just copy them anyway. I just copy them and keep. Then what we need to do is to open the file system tab. So I'll use the nano. That's the reason why we installed the nano in the first place. Right. Well, to make it easier for me, I kind of copy everything since I will be needing it. So I can just paste everything here. No, although I don't need everything I pasted anyway, but to make it easier for me to be able to copy, so I'll just do this. Mount web. Let's just say mount. Let's say mount logical. Okay, I think I have a better name somewhere, so let me just use this. but I'm just going to copy this entire thing to make it easier for me. Right, so now, so the only thing I'm changing here, so this is for the application location. So I'm going to look for the ID number, which is this. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to replace this. So paste. So I'm pasting it without the quotation mark. So I'm going to look for the log. This is the log. So I'm going to copy this. So let me just cross check. They have 88C, 8F4, 8F4. Okay. So I will need to clear this out. It's gonna take a bit of time. Gonna take a bit of time, but make it easier for us to just type everything. Okay. Try not to pause the video here so that you won't make a mistake. Exactly what I did. The reason why I pasted it here is just to make it easier for me to reference. If you have maybe a note on your system or something like that, or a place you can easily access the information, you can just post it on an external text editor or something like that, so that you can copy from that to this place. But for the sake of the video, and to make it easier for us to copy out, so that's one of the reasons why I had to make the decision to copy and paste it inside the Nano editor. I think we are done. Then I do Control Save while enter. Now we need to restart our demo reload. Alright, so take this, posts, reload, then we check, we test our setup, mouse setup. Perfect. So if you did not get any feedback when you run the command, it shows that everything is working fine. So that brings us to the end of setting up the the LV manager for the web server. We are going to run through the same thing for the DB manager. The only difference in this is that let me just show you the only difference. The only difference here is basically the naming, right? Let me just quickly show you this. Right. So the only difference here is after we create the partitions, right? The only difference here is the naming, right? I think there's an error here. Sure. Let me show I'm in the right configuration. Okay, that's not. Sure. All right. So the only difference here is instead of where we have the web data VG, we are going to have the DB data VG. That's the only difference. Probably are running the same exact configuration. Then when it comes to the naming of the LV, instead of us having app LV, we are going to have DB LV. The log still remains the same as we had earlier on. Then we are going to create our file systems based on the configuration. We are going to create the recovery locations for us to back up our log. The log is still the same thing. However, instead of us having the var under slash www.html, we are just going to have slash db. That's the only repo we are, what do you call it, repository that we are creating, or directory that we are creating, right? Then we are going to mount the db data dblv to that location and do the same thing. So that's just basically what is different. So I'm going to quickly run through this, pause and run through this so that we won't make the video too long. All right, welcome back. So we have completed the configuration of the DB server logical volume manager also. Now we need to do a bit of a configuration to ensure that our WordPress application, which is the web server, can communicate with the DB server. And for us to do that, we need to add the private IP of the web server to the security group assigned to the DB server. So to do that, we're going to go back to our instance. Oh, sorry, I think I've been logged out. So let me re-log in back. All right, welcome back. So we're back to the AWS console. So what we want to ensure is to set the security group for the two. So as you can see on my screen, I have a separate security group that manages the DB server, and this default is what I've used to manage the application server or the web server. So we are going to get the private key of the web server, which is this. Copy this. I'm going to go back to the security group of the DB. Right. Then I'm going to edit. Right. So what we are editing basically is this: a connection to the MySQL port of the DB server. So we are going to change this to this, what we have copied /32. You can press enter if you want, then save. Alright, and that's all we needed to do. Allow the port 3306 from the private server of the web server instance, which we have done. We opened the SSH port 22, which has been done before now, which we are using. Then let's confirm that the default security group have the port 80 open. I know it's open, but let's just confirm that. Right, so the normal SSH. Actually, I would like this SSH to be my IP. The port 80 is open to every IP, which is good. So we save. Right, so which completes this part of the of our work. So we are going to enter into the DB server, which is what we were working on earlier on, but due to the disconnection. So let's go back to the DB server. So I'm connecting back to the DB server, copy my command, go back to my, so, right, then I have this, let me see, then I think it's the same thing, so let's just connect using that. So basically we are back into the MySQL DB server, and what we want to do basically is to ensure that we install the MySQL server and configure the root database, and also create the database the for the WordPress that we are going to install later on. So let me just confirm that I have the right access to from time my IP address to change. So let me just confirm. I still have, oh, that has changed actually. So I think let me cancel this. So I should be able to enter right now. Good. So let's go back to the documentation. So we want to update the database, which we have done earlier on while we were trying to install, configure our LVM. So we'll just skip that and move on to installing the MySQL server. Right, so let me create this a bit. So paste this here. Add installing MySQL server. Then while that is going, we'll move to the next stage, which is, you will notice that the command is kind of different for what we are used to when we are working with Ubuntu. Here we have MySQL D instead of MySQL. So just pay attention to that subtle difference between installing MySQL on Ubuntu and installing MySQL on Red Hat. So I copy this. Let me clear so that I can see the command clearly. So I'm starting the MySQL D service. Then I'm enabling it. Copy the enable to ensure that when the system reboot or restart, the MySQL D service will be automatically restarted. So I can do this so that we have, so it has been added to the system for automatic reboots or restarts. Then what I want to do now is to update the root user. Create the password for the root user. So can clear this. Do this. So I mean I'm logged in as a root user. So copy this. This will give the root user a password of password.1. As you can see, you can use any password here. You can give it anything you like here but for demonstration purposes, I usually keep it simple by using this. So that's okay. So we flush privileges. Flush privileges command actually ensure that the changes you have made to the database, especially privileges and the likes, take effect immediately instead of waiting until the system restart takes effect immediately. So we are going to exit. Then we are going to run the MySQL secure installation scripts so that we can secure our database. So when we run this, we are going to follow the prompts. Let me clear this so that we can see properly. So follow the prompts. Now it's asking us for the password we enter. Always make sure you create your root password before you run the scripts. It's very important to do that. So it's asking if I want password validation to be added. So yes, this will ensure that when you are creating accounts on the database, it will force you to enter strong password. So I want strong password. So my root password is okay, so I don't need to change it. So I'm keeping it. Then remove, yes. Every other one will be actually will be yes. So, right, so that is done. Then I can log in into my SQL root P. Then okay, so I'm in as the root user. So let's go back to our documentation. Right. Well, I skip this. You can check the status of your database if you want, but I know this status, so I'm not really bothered. But it's also a good practice for you to do this to ensure that your database is running and the automatic restart on boot is also enabled and stuff like that. So, all right, so let's move down to creating a database for the WordPress. We call it database. You can call it any name you want. It depends on you. But for simplicity's sake, for testing purposes, we just create WordPress. Then we are going to create the admin user for the WordPress. So we are going to create that using this. Now, a bit of a twist. Now, this is for the previous documentation I did. But now we know that the private IP for our web application is a bit different from what I did earlier. So we need to confirm that. So I'm going to click on this. So this is what we are going to use now. Instead of what we have here. So anyway, I'm going to copy this. Right. I'm going to paste it, but I'm not going to run it. Then I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to copy the private IP. So what we are saying in essence that the user can only connect from that particular system. Some will actually make this a wildcard, meaning that the user can connect from any remote location, but we don't want that. So we want it to be able to connect only from this location, right? From this IP. So you can see that this IP that you have here is the same as this, which is the instance running our that will be running our WordPress application. So we really want that particular instance to have access to our database. So press enter. Then the next command which is to grant privileges or privileges to the WordPress database we created earlier on. So copy this. Just as before, we need to adjust the IP. So we'll come back here, we copy this again. Right, so we come back here, we remove this. So you need to pay attention to the username, the password, and the host name, which is the IP, because we'll be needing that when we want to set up our WordPress. So the next one is just to flush privileges and exit. Exit. I think that's all the configuration we needed to do. At this point, you can test your. You can choose to test the status of your database or MySQL service to know that everything is fine with it. Right, it's running and is enabled, which is exactly what we are looking for. Alright, so we can exit here. I think our work is done here. So let's go back to the web server and test if we can access our remote database from there. So just connect, click this, let me paste. Alright, so for us to access our remote database, the command will be bit. So we need to first install the MySQL client on here so that we can use the MySQL command. Right, and that's it. So that's clear. Now let's try to access. So what we're trying to do basically is to say, okay, let me just type it. Let me just type it. So let's copy this first. So no, we don't need that. So we need to specify where the database is being installed. The database is installed on this host. So the command will be sudo MySQL, the host, which is the database server instance. You should have copied the private IP there. The user I'm going to sign, which is my user, then my password. So though I'm not typing the password, I just press enter. Then we'll ask for the password. Alright, so I'm in. To know that, show database. This is right. You can see I have access to that. So let's exit and clear our screen. Now, so let's move to the next phase of this installation. Right. So this works, which means our web server can connect remotely to our DB database. So we are moving to the installation of the Apache and PHP, and also the PHP extension. Right. This particular step is actually peculiar to the given which is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux release 9.4. And to confirm that you're actually on the right OS, right? So you can paste this to be sure, and you can say that I'm actually on the right OS. I'm using the right OS because it's peculiar to it. To be able to install this, instead of you cramming up, or tomorrow you might have a Red Hat 10 point something, and I'm installing PHP 8.3. which is, so this particular installation process is peculiar to PHP 8.3 on a Red Hat 9.4. But in case you are using a different, you want to install a different PHP or you are using a different OS, right? You are using a different version of Red Hat. All you needed to do is come to this website, which is the Remis repo. Then you are going to select, you can select your OS depending if you are using a different OS. So for me, if you are using a CentOS OS Stream 9, or you are using Hotmart Linux 9 or 8, or whichever one you are using, you can select. So since I'm using 9, Red Hat 9.4, I select this. Then it will ask you the version of PHP you want to install. There are several versions here depending on your use cases, but for me, I'm sticking with the 8.3. Then it will ask you if you want to install multiple version of that or just a single version. For me, I just prefer just a single PHP version on my system. Then it will ask you for the architecture. If you remember, if you don't know the architecture, we come back to your instance. I think you should be able to have that information somewhere on your instance. Yes, you can see. You can see this is the architecture X3664, right? This is the architecture right here. I think yes, I think that's it. That's the architecture. If you want to confirm the kind of architecture you are running. So that brings me back to this one. So I've selected, there are several architecture, but I've selected the one I'm running with. So based on that, based on the setup, it's going to give me the various commands I need to run for me to be able to install that on my system. The first command is talking about subscription. I will basically not be bothered with this, because my Linux is not it does not have any existing subscription. So I'll start from this point, which is the install the EPEL repo. So I'm going to copy this command, which is exactly what I have in my documentation anyway. But before then, let's first install the Apache server. So let me paste. This is the Apache server we are installing first. Yes. So we're going to start the Apache server. Then we are going to enable it for restart, just as we did with the MySQL. But you notice when we install the MySQL client, we did not do all this restart or no, because the MySQL is just an interface to connect to the database service. All right, to test that everything is fine, you can check the status. Then also we can check it on the browser. So let me just, so we go back to our instance, copy the public IP, come to my browser and paste this. So there are two things you want to confirm. You want to confirm that everything is fine with our setup. Then you want to confirm that the port 80 is truly open. So do it, continue. Let's give it some time. It should come up. Right. So let me see. Just wanted to be sure that my port 80 is working fine. Okay, sorry, I'm in the wrong. Oh, I copied the wrong IP. Sorry about that. So I'm supposed to copy this. So this is the IP, this is the right IP. But the port 80 is now open on the DB server. So this is the right IP. So this should work, yes. So this is fine. Everything is working fine with this. right? So everything is working fine with this. So we'll move to the next step. Right, so you should have this. If everything works fine, you should have this page as you can see on my screen. So let's move to the configuration installation of PHP. You can see that what you have on the REMIS is basically what I have in my documentation anyway. So, but let's use the REMIS as our basis. So I can go to, let me clear this. So you can either copy the code from my documentation if you are installing exactly what I'm installing, which it means you are running on the RedX 9.4, you want to install PHP 8.3, just like I did. So I'll do sudo and paste the command, wait for it. So if you are using T2 micro, this is the part you will have a problem, and that's the reason why I have to scale back to T2 small. So to copy the next command, which is, you can just copy it directly from which has the sudo already there. So let me just copy instead of me typing sudo all the time. So let me clear this, paste. So this can take a bit of time. Alright, so assuming we are on T2 micro, will have gotten stuck somewhere around here. Everything will have get stuck and nothing will have worked. So our repos are working fine. So the next step is we want to switch to the PHP 8.3 module so that we can install it. So that is the switch. What that is, let's go to the next command. Oh, let's go click in basically yes. So that's it done. So then I will install the PHP 8.3 and the default extension that comes with it. So it's going to install some extensions. So you can see it's going to install the PHP CLI extension, the common, then it's going to install this package, which is very important for our Apache. Although we always say that Apache can execute a PHP command without any external package, but for performance issue, for performance point of view, is always important or very good. And I think what WordPress actually recommend us having our PHP fast CGI process manager installed so that it will be responsible for executing PHP code on our system. To be sure that all the necessary module we have, all the necessary extension we need for the WordPress is installed, we're going to run this command to install additional extensions that will be needed by WordPress. So just copy and paste. Alright, see that it has a larger, it has a bigger extension libraries that we are installing. So yes, install that, yes. So it's going to install all these extensions. So we need to start the PHP FPM and also enable it to ensure that when the system comes from the boot, it will automatically starts with the system because it's needed by our web browser to be able to execute PHP code. So we paste that. You can also check the status if you want. So but not strictly. So we need to restart our Apache so that we can take note of the changes we have made so far. Now we need to do an extra configuration called security enhanced line also. Because of the regex that we are using, there are some security features that comes the with the OS, by restricting access to files and the like. So it has a very strict access control policy. So, and for us, for our web browsers to be able to work effectively with the application, we need to make some extra configuration. So you can check the status here by copying this command. Right, so well, it's not necessary for you to copy the command, but just for you to be sure that it's enforcing. You can see it has this to enabled, allowed, policy denied, unknown status, allowed, and stuff like that. So we need to configure our web browser to be able to access the different file system it needed to be able to run. And to do that, we are going to run this command, which kind of more like exempting the web browser from these strict and giving it the necessary access to the various file system it needs to work on. Also, we also need to add another permission to the web browser for external HTTP requests, as you can see. So we copy this and we paste. This will ensure that our web browser have the necessary access to run what it needs to run. So we can check our PHP version by pasting this. Then you can see we have the PHP 8.3. So we can also do PHP to see all the module installed. You can see all the module installed, which is fine. Then we can test that everything is working fine by creating this file, the info file, to check that our server can run PHP command. So just create that file, then paste this inside the file. Just paste, then save. Yes, enter, save. Then, so we go back to the browser, basically. Go back to the browser. So we are going to do /p/info, the name of the file we just created, PHP. Then we should be able to see the PHP page. So this shows that our PHP interpreter is working fine and our browser can interpret PHP code. So what we need to do is to delete this file, because for security reason you can't leave it running, because it exposes a lot of information about our server, which is a security concern. So we delete this. Just for us to temporarily test that everything is working. So we can go back to our own page where we have the defaults. I think I'm going to correct this. So the next thing we want to do, we have this installed already, so there's no point installing it again. We installed it earlier when we were installing the nano, but if you are not too sure, you can install this again. Then we want to download the WordPress source code, the latest, which is WordPress 6.6. So I paste it here. So wait for it. So if you do LX, you should be able to see that it has been downloaded. So we have to unzip it or archive it. So we do this, run this. So let's clear. So I can remove the downloaded file by doing this and do the test. Alright. This is actually the second command that you are seeing here, just to delete it since we don't need it. You can read more on the implication of the XZVF flag here. As you can see, X is to extract, Z tell data to decompress using the gzip, V is to display the output of what is being extracted, which is actually similar to what we have when we are doing our backing up and restoring using the harp sync. Then F is to specify the file to operate on, which is actually telling it to operate on this file. Then we need to move the WordPress file folder to the HTTP folder location, which is what our external drive, the EBS is actually mounted on. So it's more like us copying it into the EBS. Then I'm going to give the web server ownership of the WordPress file so that it can operate on it without restrictions. Then also I'm going to give it permission to read and write on that file location, which is what the 755 is all about. The hard flag is say apply this permission recursively, that is to the parent and to the children and child. Then there's an extra configuration which is needed for the Linux security policy, where we are kind of giving it a kind of a context or something like that. You can read a bit on that. So basically, I think this is basically for Redux distribution, OS distribution, or something very similar to that. So we're going to run this, and we are fine. So then we need to start our server. You will notice that we are not configuring any database, we are not doing anything. What we just did is download the WordPress, extract it, put it in the right folder, right? Give the web server the necessary permission to be able to read and write to the WordPress folder. Then we restart our server, then we go to our browser. Now, what we need to do is in our browser, we're going to say slash the folder we have the WordPress, which is slash WordPress, then we press enter. If everything works well, it should be able to declare the WordPress configuration file. So you pick your language. For me, I usually like to do English UK, right? Then press OK to let go. Now, remember we created a database called WordPress, and the user was my user, and the password we used then was S. Right, let me see if I can get it right. Right, so if you are not sure, you go back to the documentation, right, when we were creating the user, right, you can see this is the user, right, this is the password, right, and this is the database name. Now the host name, I can remember we said the host name will be the private IP of our DB server. So let's go there. Let me see if I can configure the other thing. Okay, that's everything we needed now. So I click on this, the DB server, and I copy the private IP. So I'm going to change this localhost to this. And the reason why I'm saying that, when we say localhost, what we are saying is the database is on the same system that is running the WordPress application, but the database is not on the same system. So that's the reason why we change it from host name to the private IP of the of the system running the DB itself. And that's just all the configuration we need to do. So we press on submit, then we say run installation. So you can give, give it a name. I still just want to maintain this name. Well, it will automatically give you a password. You can set as a very strong password that you remember, because it's very important you remember this. But for me, I'll just set my default password. But it's always important that you don't use your database password as your your admin user password. So, but anyway, for demonstration purposes, we just wanted to do this. Confirm password, confirm the user of weak password. Well, this is more like a weak password anyway. So, but for demonstration purposes, discourage search engine from indexing the sites. Well, this is just a demonstration site, so I just want to do this. But if you're actually installing a business application, a business WordPress application that is going to be used for different business purposes and whatever, you are encouraged not to do this, because it's going to prevent your what they call it, your SEO optimization and what have you. So click on install and wait for the server to do its thing. So everything is done. So now I can log in. So I can just do my user and the password. Like I said, the password is just for demonstration purposes. Ensure that the password for your user is different from the password for your database. They are two different entities. So you want to ensure that the password you are using and the username you are using, the username you use for your database and the username you are using for your admin user into your application are two different things. So, but just for simplicity and for demonstration purposes, I just want to keep it the same. But it's highly recommended that you don't do the same thing. So if everything works fine, I should be able to come to the dashboard. So this is a WordPress, as you can see, right, which is similar to what you saw when I started my video. So if you're a WordPress guru, you can start customizing, adding themes, doing a lot of customization on your system. It's asking me to reinstall, maybe because of the language I picked. So if you want to, you can do that. So yeah, so this is the language I picked, so everything seems to be fine, right? So go back to my dashboard, you can see everything. So that's how you install a WordPress on the AWS Red Hat OS, and you probably have an old installation that you want to migrate from maybe share hosting server to a cloud hosting. Basically the same thing. After you have installed a new fresh installation, you can just go and restore from your backup. There's some, I think there's one thing we call WP all-in-one plugin that you use to back up your WordPress, that you can install it from the old backup. So I think that's all. Until we meet later, you can like and comment on this video, and I'll do my best to answer as many questions as possible. Thank you.